I have put together the top 10 frequently asked questions on Bernina sewing machines. Hi, I'm Sarah from sewingmastery.com, and there's common questions that we get asked all the time, whether it's online, our most viewed videos, or just in our retail store. The most common questions that always come up by new students that are buying new Berninas. They've had Berninas and now they're buying a fancier one. So I've put together the list and hopefully give you some ideas of what you've been doing right and maybe what you could be doing better. So from the top, in no particular order, number one, do I need to oil my Bernina sewing machine? And the answer is yes. Bernina makes their machines in such a way that lubrication really is what keeps them running smooth and quiet. If you're having any trouble with your machine and you are snagging threads, breaking threads, one of the things that will make it so much better is to oil the machine. We're talking just down here in the bobbin area. So your book will show you where to oil. Our videos on sewingmastery.com will show you where to oil for many different models. And we've got some great tips to kind of get in and then get everything back together so quick and easy that for some models, we recommend that you actually oil every time you sit down. Some of our models, we will find that oiling every 2 to 3 bobbins that you have used up is a great way to kind of keep an eye on how many stitches you're actually taking. Because saying to oil every 8 hours, well, there's so much prep in a project that your time at your sewing machine is probably very small compared to how much time it takes to prep. So that is always kind of a hard one. So by going by how much bobbin thread you've used up will give you an idea. As soon as you get a thread break or a little hiccup in your stitching, an oiling timeout will be a wonderful thing. And also when you're down there, go ahead and clean out that area, and don't forget, canned air is nothing we should be using around our Bernina sewing machine. Along that same line, a very frequently asked question is, how often do I change my needle? Now this will be good information no matter which sewing machine you actually own, and a needle is the lifeblood of your machine. So as soon as something doesn't go well, and if you can't remember when the last time you put a new needle in, it's probably time. Again, if your thread breaks in the middle of sewing, change your needle. If you're getting any like little loops on the top of your fabric, change your needle. And if things are shredding, yeah, you're going to need to put a new needle in. Now just remember, there is more than just one type of needle and more than one size. So depending on what you're doing, you will definitely need to pick the right size for the fabric and thread that you have chosen to sew on. So there's lots of information up. We're going to put some links below this YouTube video to help you find additional information on cleaning and oiling and changing needles. So make sure that you check out any and all the resources that we have listed below. Next, when do you have your machine professionally cleaned? We just talked about cleaning and oiling down in the bobbin area because fabrics are linty. We sew, and that's really where the first line of defense is, where you and I take care of our machines. We always recommend at our store that once a year is a good time to have your machine brought in, gone through, and serviced. Everything is going to stay in top-notch running condition. Now, I will tell you, this has been a busy year for service, and as everybody started pulling out their sewing machines and doing more sewing, we found that those that had kept their annual service nice and orderly and scheduled found that their machines were just humming when everybody else was kind of scrambling to get their machine pulled out. It had sat for a while, 3 or 4 years since their last time that they even sewed on it. Those machines are going to have a little rough time, maybe not have a great experience trying to sew something that you're trying to sew. So keeping everything scheduled will make such a difference. So when you're ready to sew, it's ready to join you for a wonderful, smooth sewing journey. Tension. Tension is always a question. And you know, when I teach my classes, tension is something that I kind of keep pushing pushing off to the side, because you know what? Tension is usually not the problem with the sewing machine, but it's a very commonly asked question. Everybody thinks, oh my gosh, the tension's off. Something happened. Oh, the tension's to blame for it. It's actually not. There's so many variables when you are sitting in front of a sewing machine. You have fabric, thread, needle choices, stitches. There's so many different things that can make things maybe not work out in your favor. And I will tell you, tension is not the problem. Let's just say, for example, that you put the same weight of thread in your needle as you do in the bobbin. That means that those threads are balanced. So tension isn't really about adjusting for those threads, but when things start to happen, that's what people blame it on. Now, here's the real answer to tension. Let's make sure you're using a good quality thread. So that would be something, check with your local Bernina store, see what they recommend for thread. And yes, when you do pay more for thread, you get a better quality thread. So if you're finding thread that's very inexpensive and you can get so many colors in a packet, that may not actually be the greatest thread, especially for this high performance vehicle that you're driving around. Make sure you're giving it good food, good fuel for it to perform the way you're expecting it to perform. If you put junk thread in it, it's gonna just kind of be a little cranky. So make sure that that is something that you're doing. Make sure you've cleaned, had your machine serviced. See, all these things play together, and tension is usually not a problem. Now I'm going to stop right here because there's quilts behind me. This one is our Bernina Stitching Cosmos online course. Again, links below where you can watch 10 of those videos for free. But we get into working with decorative threads, Bernina accessory feet, and learn all the inside and corners of this machine, actually all the Bernina machines, because you all use all the same feet. We really get into understanding tension more, but for a powerful use and not because it's a frustration, something we blame. So tension is meant to be adjusted when threads are different weights, because we use decorative threads in there. We use different things in our bobbin. We even do bobbin work where we're sewing upside down and we've put really thick thread in our bobbin. So totally fun things. That's when you really get to understand what tension is all about. But to tell you the truth, it's nothing to be worried about. Check all these other things that people are asking about why their machines are having trouble before you just start altering your tension. Probably needles and thread are your first places to check. The next question, very common. We all get it, even I get this. You're sewing along and you realize things are not sounding well. Again, another thing people blame tension on. And you flip your fabric over and you've got that bird's nest of thread underneath it. And it's just like, what went wrong? And so the first thing to do, because it happened on the back of the fabric, everybody goes digging in their bobbin. They take the bobbin out and they put it back in. Maybe you clean it finally, maybe put a little oil in there. But you know what the problem is that you, operator error, did not thread the machine correctly on the top. I know it's on the bottom, but it's actually when the thread is not in the top tension. So it's not a tension problem. That is, I didn't thread the machine correctly. So one thing we always talk about is when we thread the machine, hold on to the thread at the spool and thread the machine with your left hand. By having that little resistance as you come down and go through each of the guides, maybe even give it a little flossing factor where you can feel it really getting sunk into the tension disc. And also make sure that your presser foot is up when you're rethreading the machine. Tell you the truth, if you do that correctly, foot up, thread the machine, little floss back and forth, finish it, sew on it, it will probably work 99.9% of the time, and it was actually just our problem. So that little nest of thread, definitely something to keep an eye on. If it starts to happen more, it might be time for one of those professional cleanings. Let's talk about the Bernina needle threader. Now, Bernina's put needle threaders on their machines for years now, and they're wonderful. But I see so many people still trying to thread their needle by hand because, oh, I don't get that needle threader. It's never worked from day one. Well, think first. If you were a needle threader, how small do you have to be to get through an eye of a needle? Plus, you're not just a little piece of metal, you're two pieces of metal with a little hook, and it's coming through and pulling the thread through. So things can offset that little hook, and if necessary, your local Bernina technician can realign it or get it back where it's supposed to be. But you do need to do a couple things. Number one, make sure your needle is at the height highest position. If it's not, that hole in that needle threader don't line up, and then all of a sudden it gets kind of shifted to this side. Then it's never going to work. It's never lined up with the hole. Next, I would avoid touching and turning the hand wheel of a machine. So anytime you turn that hand wheel, things start to change that location. And starting and stopping and having to hold your threads when you start to sew, there's just so many things that kind of change when you start to change the machine. Machines these days are electronic. They stop and start at the highest position, and it's perfect. It's also where that needle threader works the best. So let the machine always kind of naturally come up to the highest point. Unless you're still using a Bernina with that it's mechanical, then you're turning that hand wheel, make sure the take-up lever comes to the highest place of the machine, and then your needle threader will work. People always ask me, is it okay to travel with this machine? It's so expensive, it's so heavy. Well, of course it is. It traveled all the way to your home via multiple ways of transportation. So it is meant to be sturdy. It is going to survive a car ride. You're going to a class, you're going to a retreat. Go enjoy it, take it with you. And if you need help taking it with you, that's where the suitcase systems will help, the roller wheels on the bags make it so much easier to transport. The only thing you really need to be careful of is the screen. You know, it's a computer screen, so just make sure that that is not something that could be left exposed and something hit it. Also, if you do have the silver knobs here, those are something else that they do stick out, so make sure things are not rubbing up against those. But your machine is meant to travel. And the other one, kind of on this same line, is can that sewing machine go through my heavy, heavy fabrics? I hear so many times when people actually have a separate sewing machine for their heavier projects. I'm like, why did you buy the Bernina if you're going to still use this other machine for heavy duty work? That's what it's for. Don't be afraid to go ahead and put those heavy projects, those extra thick layers through it. The machine will go through it. And if it's not, maybe it just needs a different needle to help penetrate through the layers you're asking it to go through. What type of bobbins does my machine need? Yes, there is a handful of different Bernina types of bobbins. So you do have to make sure that you are always using the one that's right for your machine. This isn't a mix and match. Not all older Bernina bobbins will fit in the newer machines. So just make sure that you're aware of which bobbins your Bernina needs, and your Bernina retailer in your area can always help you get the right ones. And make sure you're always buying genuine Bernina bobbins. There are a lot of bobbins out there, and they might look very similar. They might say Bernina, and they might not actually be the ones for your machine. So why don't you just always buy the right ones? That's one thing you don't want to have troubles with, is when you buy things that are not specifically made for your exact machine. So I actually have 2 more tips, but I have added a bonus topic for us at the end. So I got 3 more topics to talk about. Number 1, thread. People always ask me, well, what thread should I use? Well, there's so many different threads. But again, we've touched on it. Quality thread makes a difference. So again, it's like putting a higher octane gas in a high performance vehicle. You need to put a quality thread in. Yes, you are going to pay more for that thread, and that actually means it's a better thread. So you do find that some of my favorites are Mettler, Aurifil, Gutermann, Isacord, and those, I'll put all those names down below where you could check those out and what they are. I do sew and play with lots of different weights of thread. So especially when we get into our Bernina Stitching Cosmos online course, there's so much to learn. And playing with different decorative threads is part of just realizing what your machine is capable of doing. But there is going to be some threads, if you have any trouble, just switch them out. Put some threads back in that you know work, and see if it was the thread, or see if you actually have a machine issue that you need to figure out even further. But don't let thread be that problem. Switch it out, try your different threads, find which ones you like the best, and then stick with those quality brands of thread. And last, a question I get all the time in my class: do I still need to hold my threads when I start to sew? So you actually don't. With the computerized machines, you are stopping and starting with that needle in the highest position. It really eliminates a lot of the reasons why we used to hold our threads when we started to sew. But really, if you slide your fabric in all the way underneath your presser foot, and that needle comes down in fabric first, you're going to find that that is going to take off Those first couple stitches are not going to be any problem, and no, you really don't need to hold your threads when you start to sew. Now, because of the Bernina Stitching Cosmos online course, we feature over 18 different Bernina presser feet. I know, it's so much fun, but a lot of people say, oh my gosh, that's a lot of feet. What if I don't have all those feet? Can I even take the course? And I always say yes, because Bernina makes so many accessories. The Bernina course is actually an hour to an hour and a half longer than our Husqvarna Viking and Pfaff Stitching Cosmos courses because it has so many feet. So one thing people say is, do I need all the feet? And I say, no, it's something that you can actually watch the course, see which feet are right for you. Then some people say, can I buy generic feet? And that is one thing I'm kind of not a fan of because they're not made the way Bernina makes them to fit on the machine. They're designed in a certain way. You know how solid these feet are when you put them on. And when you start to work with generic feet, they don't always line up with the feed dogs just right. The materials are not to that same quality that Bernina uses. So why even bother? Why spend half the price and then realize that it didn't work and now you're having to buy the real Bernina foot on top of that? Just treat yourself. You've already treated yourself to this beautiful sewing machine. Take the time to buy the right feet for the way you sew. And yes, there's so many different sizes for some feet, so you don't need all of them, but you might need 1 or 2 sizes. And that's what the Bernina Stitching Cosmos online course will help with. It will help you realize which are the best features for you to be using and feet and accessories that you should have with your machine. And going forward, those feet are going to fit future Bernina machines. So I hope I can see you in some of our online courses coming up soon. If you have any questions, make sure you visit sewingmastery.com. And if any of these tips have been helpful for you, make sure you give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel as we continue to come out with additional Bernina videos.